I'm not going to speak for very long, very brief time. I'm just going to introduce us. But as you'll see on the pictures there's Kelly Sykes, who is a nurse that was one of the first medical personnel on the ground with us, and then Dr. Ingrid Donato to my right there, and they're a lot better looking than I am. So just starting off with this first picture that was provided by Kelly Sykes, I thought this was a great, it just really captured the essence of what we experienced. Really the whole deployment was really, I would call it a God thing. I was actually with Ken Isaacs in Thailand just on the eve of when the typhoon hit. And so literally I was just a few hours, a stone's throw away from the Philippines, and so I just hopped on a plane and went over to Cebu. As you know, the Philippines is an archipelago of over like 7,000 islands. It's incredible. The typhoon, though, it predominantly affected two islands, Eastern Samar Island and then Leyte, and the epicenter was Tacloban, where we did much, and we're still doing much of our work. But you can see by this picture, it's just incredible devastation. I'll never forget when I first flew over. I flew over from the island of Cebu over to Leyte. I flew over in a Filipino C-130, military C-130, with two other persons, and it was really surreal experience. It was like hundreds of people in this C-130 amidst all this, various equipment, and it was just all thrown in there, and there was steam coming in to the plane, and it was really surreal and a scary experience. We landed in Tacloban. I'll never forget landing in the airport there, and it was crazy. The military was there. There was walled off. There was thousands of Filipino people trying to get out on very limited flights through the military C-130. And it was just, it was devastation. The media, how did they describe it? They described it as off the scale and apocalyptic. So it was just incredible devastation. Some of the pictures that I'm going to share with you are graphic, because I really want you to capture the essence of what it was all about. When I got there, I'll never forget, I was with Aaron Ashoff and John Akudaga, and two great guys. And for the first 4 days, we were really just trying to set up base, talk to the Department of Health, establish relationships, and integrate ourselves so that we could respond within the UN cluster system and provide the best care that we could. And every morning we would start the day off in devotions and prayer. And I remember that Isaiah was a book that we referred to very strongly. And this is one of my favorite verses you'll see here. It says Isaiah 43:18 and 19. It says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell in the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the desert and springs in the wasteland." And that just resonated in my mind. It was like, what next? What next? We couldn't ask why. God is mysterious and He's sovereign, and His ways are much greater than ours. But we had to ask not why, but what next? How could we intervene and use this opportunity to help the people of the Philippines and share the love of Christ? One of the things that you really need to intervene in a disaster is you need an appeal to the greater international community. And this is just I think a real poignant picture that I took. It was adjacent to the hospital where we responded, the Schistosomiasis Control and Research Hospital. And indeed, the Filipino people were overwhelmed, and there was certainly an international appeal for help. And we were able to do that. We were very fortunate to be able to intervene. Here's just another picture of just the apocalyptic disaster. Just to give you a little bit more information about the typhoon, the wind speed was unprecedented. It's recorded as the most powerful typhoon in the recorded history of storms. There were sustained winds approaching 200 miles an hour. There was surge winds that were recorded up to 235 miles per hour. How anyone survived that, I do not know. And to capture, and to top it off, really what they say, most of the people succumbed not to the gale force winds, but in fact the surge, the water that came afterwards. Many people drowned. I remember very vividly when I first arrived, we went into downtown Tacloban, and we came in. It looked like a mini version of the Astrodome or the Superdome, and it was ostensibly a safe haven. It was an evacuation center, and hundreds and hundreds of Filipino people were packed in there, and unfortunately, it was not a safe haven. Many of the people in the first floor drowned because of the sudden surge. And I can tell you guys, by being there, you ask yourself, why didn't they leave? There was nowhere to go. I'm telling you, there's nowhere to go in this storm. So they did everything they could. These people are amazing, very resilient. I applaud them for the way they responded to this disaster. When I was there, you could not go through the roads because there was so much debris, power lines everywhere, and so literally what I did to get to the Department of Health is I thumbed a ride on a moped. There was mopeds driving everywhere, and I'll say I think the mortality was profoundly underestimated. I think it stands right now at about 6,200 dead, but I can tell you right now they're on average are finding still about 5 bodies a day. So again, I think there was it was intentionally underestimated for various reasons. But literally, you guys, there was bodies everywhere, and I tried to be tactful about but I just wanted to share with you a few pictures of what I saw. Just bodies everywhere, of people, of dogs, of pigs, and just intermingled with buildings just devastated, just decimated, power lines down everywhere, and people. If you saw the look of the person's faces, that would speak 1,000 words. I wish I could share with you. But all that said, I'd like to transition now and just really, I'd like to emphasize from here out what happened. God uses devastation. He uses trials for opportunity. And I think, as you all know, if you reflect on your own life, sometimes it takes trials to wake us up. And I'm not saying that God caused this, but I'm saying that sometimes trials happen, disasters happen, and we have to make the best of it and move forward. And God is opening up a new land in the desert. Here I am, or here we are with the Filipino staff. If you guys were a part of this, it was just an incredible experience to share with them. Many of the people you see in this picture, they lost loved ones, family members, friends. Really nobody was unaffected by this disaster. Here's a picture of some of the first medical team, and I'll tell you, if you've never responded with people on a disaster, you can't describe the relationship building that's a part of it. It's like you're in a foxhole with them, and you develop bonds for life. So these people are just phenomenal people. Can't say enough great things. And then finally, I just want to focus on, disregard me, but look at the girl on the right there. Just, again, the Filipino people were just beautiful people. They didn't wait and sit on the sidelines. They jumped right in, incredibly resilient. Really, they have a pull up yourself by the bootstraps attitude, and we worked side by side with them, and it was phenomenal what was accomplished. I just want to say on behalf of the organization, Franklin Graham was there, and many of you all saw them. That was there at our field hospital, and he had tremendous support for what we did, and he really advocates for what we're doing in the medical sector. I'd like to just briefly talk about that. We did set up a Field 1 or a Level 1 field hospital. We co-located, again, we were assigned to this hospital called Schistosomiasis Control and Research Hospital, and I think it was an incredible relationship. We established our base there on the campus of their hospital. This hospital was devastated by the storm. The whole roof was removed, and they were really just rendered, they were incapacitated by the storm. And we were able to set up our field hospital and just work alongside them and just help them to get back on their feet. I'm going to stop talking in just a minute here because I really want Ingrid and Kelly to provide the essence of what they experienced. And really, for everyone here, the listening audience, I really hope that this engages you, and really, I hope it calls you forward in disaster response here at Samaritans First. There's a lot of opportunities. I will say we're going forward with the development of our field hospital. In fact, we're getting ready to, we're involved in another simulated disaster in the state of Alaska at the end of March. It's called Alaska Shield, where we're going to set up a level 2. This is another step forward, a level 2 field hospital, and that's going to be very, very exciting. But we're really developing ourselves here to have greater medical capacity in the setting of disasters. But I think what's really important after we come home, you know, we always have AARs, after action reviews, because we want to ask ourselves, what did we learn? What are the take-home messages? And I just wrote down a few. We could talk about many, and Kelly and Ingrid are going to elaborate on some themselves, but some that I wrote down, it's critical that we work within the system. What do I mean by that? It's critical, first of all, that you work with the host country. You're a guest there. They invited you. Maybe they don't have all the technology that we have, but they have certainly incredible know-how. They are experts at endemic disease. We learned a tremendous amount from them about dengue, about schistosomiasis, about chikungunya. I didn't even know how to say that before I got there. I probably mispronounced it. But we worked within the Department of Health. We were assigned to that hospital. We worked within the UN cluster system, which is still evolving, and they're developing themselves and improving. You know, you want to work within the local medical community. They still have know-how in some capacity, so find out what that is and find out what they want from you. You know, don't take over. It's their community. We're guests. Site location is critical. We really didn't have much of a choice, but it's ideal that you pick the right place. Where we were susceptible to flooding. We encountered that. Again, we didn't have much say-so where we set up shop, but site location is important. You want to ask yourself, are you in a safe place? Are you free from falling debris? Are you free from persons that might loot what you bring to the table? Are you where the host persons want you to be? Again, we co-located alongside with them, and that worked out very well. But there's a lot of pertinent questions to ask about location. Sustainability always comes up in disaster response, but I know some people are not advocates of field hospitals. I tend to disagree. It's not, I think, sustainable, but I think these are extenuating circumstances. This is a level, you know, a level 5 storm. It was unprecedented in the Philippines, so you've got a number of patients with traumatic injury that they don't normally see. So I don't think it has to be sustainable, but I think there's a point in time where there's a need, and I think the field hospitals can come along and help out. Country-specific formulary, that's something that's really important. Ideally, when you utilize medications, as a general rule, you'd like to utilize pharmaceuticals that are available in the country that they can continue after you leave. Don't overlook chronic illness. That's something else that was a very poignant example here in the Philippines. I was surprised by how much hypertension, how much diabetes, vascular disease there were. So you can't overlook that. You're certainly focusing on acute trauma, but you've got to look at chronic illness. And then finally, we have a great opportunity for spiritual impact, and that's critical. But with that, I am going to hush my mouth, and I am going to turn it over to Ms. Kelly.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, Lance. And I just want to say, I think you'll be interested to know our emotions. We were stuck in Cebu waiting to go over to Tacloban where Lance was, and so eager to get started. And we finally found out we had a plane ride over. And I think Mary Lou and I and one other nurse, and I think John Freiler was on that flight, and I'm telling you, nobody talked. I think we're just anticipating. We had no idea what to expect, but I leaned over to Mary Lou, and I said, I feel like I'm taking a plane ride into hell, because I had been watching CNN for the 5 days leading up to me flying over there, and I was just so uncertain about what was going to happen and what we would see over there. But we took medicine. That was so important, medical care, but we found out we provided so much more than just medicine. In those first week or two, really, we really came across so many people with post-traumatic stress. They were just hurting, and you could see it on their face. The children were literally just numb. They had seen bodies. They had seen people die. They were sick. They had injuries, and we provided a lot of medical care, but really hope and love is what, in the end, I look back on that we really did a great job with. So the hospital, you'll see on that bench, it's not a bundle of clothes, there's actually a baby lying there, but the hospital was so demolished, their whole top floor, so they had to kind of cram all into one little area. So they had pediatrics crammed in. We had so many pediatric patients before the field hospital came, and they had no beds, so we really had to just put people on benches, and the baby is laying on the bench, and the mom laid on the bench next to her, and that's where she spent the night. So that first week, we really just worked side by side. We had a buddy system, and we worked with, the nurses worked with buddy nurses who were nationals, and then the doctors worked with national doctors. And really the hospital had no idea of knowing from their staff standpoint who was going to show up on any given day. The cell phones were all down. People were either injured or hurt or hadn't checked in, so they had no idea of knowing staff-wise who was going to show up every day. So we did a great job of coming alongside of them and really just supplementing for them. And I'll back up what Lance said. Every single day we did devotions with the hospital staff, and every single day Lance would say, we are here to help you, and you let us know how we can help you and bless you. This is your hospital, and we just want to help you. And I think that really opened up hearts, and they were so thankful and so gracious to us and so hospitable. And I think that attitude of going in saying, we are here to help you, really fostered a great relationship. In this picture is our field hospital had arrived about a week later, and the one on the top left is the outpatient tent where patients would wait for outpatient care, which really relieved the hospital because they had no room to do outpatient since they were just working with one floor of the hospital. So that really helped them, and the patients would wait and get triaged, and then they'd come in the back area right there and see 4 different doctors. They'd see one of the 4. The one on the right is that we had another tent that was a treatment tent. And so if they needed IVs or wound care or tetanus shots or any kind of treatment, they would come to that tent. So like I said, the first 2 weeks, it extended into the whole 30 days that I was there. But the first 2 weeks especially, we saw such hurting people, and it was really impactful to me. I still can hardly think of it without tearing up, but the first few days we were working in the actual hospital, and I was actually working in the emergency room part, and an elderly man was in the emergency room, and he had had a really devastating stroke, and he had aspirated by this point, and he was literally, just going to die, and he had survived this terrible storm and only to have a stroke a few days later. And his wife was with him, and she was just distraught. And she asked me, where are you from? And I said, I'm from the United States, and I'm here with Samaritan's Purse. And she grabbed onto my arms and sobbed and said, why would you come? Why would you come all this way? I don't understand why you would come in a storm and in a disaster. And she was so sweet and hurting so much. And I just said, we serve and love Jesus Christ, and we are here to help you recover. And I'm so sorry about your husband. And we prayed, and she just held on to me and sobbed for 15 minutes. So it was very touching, those kinds of moments. This sweet little boy in this picture came into the treatment tent, and he had a wound on his foot. We saw a lot of those. People would step on debris or get gashes in their arm from cleaning debris. But this little boy, he doesn't look like it in this picture at this moment, but he was extremely flat with his affect, and he didn't even flinch when I gave him a tetanus shot. When I cleaned his very large wound, nothing. He was just almost dead inside. And I asked the person who brought him, "Is he okay? What's his story?" And she said, well, he was with his mom and sister during the storm, and his sister got swept away in the current, and his mom left the home to go out to try to get her, and she got hit in the head with some flying debris, and so his mom and sister both died right in front of him. And we just heard stories like this over and over and over and over. And this little boy, I just hugged him and played with him and gave him a stuffed animal that one of the doctors had brought to give out, and eventually he sort of loosened up, and about a week later he came back for no reason, and the person that brought him said he really wanted to come back and say hi to you. And it was just stories like this that were so impactful of how we brought so much more than medicine. Again, just the everyday, especially when you're cleaning wounds and they have to come back day after day after day for the wound change, the dressing change. We would have a lot of time with patients. This guy on the right, he actually was riding his motorcycle and got hit by a bus. So his friends brought him into the treatment tent, and he was quite in shock. He had a large laceration on his upper temple, which you can see, that Dr. Gettle sutured up, and it took me 2.5 hours. He had so much road rash from head to toe. It took me 2.5 hours to clean him up, and his whole heel was shaved off, and every day he came back, day after day after day, and he really wouldn't talk. He was kind of shocky still, and just giving a gentle touch and just talking to him and just showing love and compassion to him and asking him, is it okay if I pray with you? And he totally loved that and came back the last day before he was dismissed to go and just gave us in the treatment tent a big hug and a big smile. It was so impactful in my life. This is not an exhaustive list, of course, but some common things that we saw quite a bit of. Lots and lots and lots of puncture wounds. I don't know, I couldn't even begin to count how many tetanus shots we gave. Lots of antibiotics for wounds. We saw a lot of pneumonia and a lot of asthma, especially as time went on and people started burning debris. There was so much smoke, it was really getting to all of us, actually, so much smoke, and so we had a lot of asthma. One of the problems was the hospital kept running out of oxygen, and where they'd go and refill was quite a long ways away. So Samaritan's Purse was able to, through logistics, get them a truck, and then they would go, and I think they had to drive a good 2.5 hours away, and they'd refill their oxygen tanks and then come back to the hospital, and we'd be good to go for a little while. But we saw lots of TB, lots of all these other things, lots of tetanus shots. Then about maybe week 2, as we started kind of moving outward, we saw other areas farther out from Tacloban that were just beyond devastated, even more so than Tacloban, I think the others would agree. And so we started doing mobile clinics. We would work at the hospital in the morning, and then they do pretty well on their own after that, so we would go off onto these medical brigades, and that was really great. We just had a more opportunity to go out into the environment and see people who had really not received any medical care. So we, again, had a little pharmacy area, which is in the back there. The doctors would see their patients. We had a little triage station set up, and then we had a wound care and treatment area set up where we do IVs or whatever needed to be done. A lot of what we learned looking back was just really being flexible. Every day when we'd go out, yes, we knew where we were going, but we didn't quite know what kind of a building we would set up in. If we'd have a building at all, lots of times we would set up in a school or a community center. We didn't know if they had been damaged. We didn't know. We just have to be very flexible. We had no clue how many patients would show up. And I think that's on the smaller side of the numbers that we saw, but we just had to be really flexible and work in whatever situation would present itself. But another thing that could get frustrating was, we'd try to pack the things that we thought we needed, and then sure enough, we'd have a patient who needed something that we didn't pack, or we'd run out of things. But you just have to be flexible and roll with it and just have fun with it. The patients were amazing. They were so generous and so loving. On top of all of that, we also got to partner with UNICEF. As you probably know, in a disaster setting, outbreaks of measles and polio is a huge problem and a huge risk, and UNICEF had arrived, and they had thousands and thousands and thousands of immunizations to provide, but they really needed the medical staff to do the clinics. So we would work at the hospital in the morning, and then some groups of us would go out on the mobile clinics, and then others of us would go on these immunization clinics. And we'd go to the UNICEF area where they had set up with another hospital in town, and they'd provide us with the location of where we needed to go and a little cooler, and they'd tell us where we needed to go, and we'd show up there, and we had to just be really flexible. We were right in the little barangay, which are the little communities, and we would just work with the community leader and just do hundreds of measles, polio, and vitamin A. It was a great experience. Another great thing we got to do, medical wasn't the only thing Samaritan's Purse did. We had a very large WASH, which is water and sanitation and hygiene. They were amazing, and they worked so hard. You can imagine in this situation how much this was needed. And food distribution, became important. But one Saturday, the WASH group really needed to get these buckets out. These are water filtration buckets, and this is the warehouse to the left, and just hundreds and hundreds. I think there were 700, I might be wrong with that, buckets that we needed to get rid of and distribute. And so the medical team participated in that, working alongside the WASH, and it was wonderful to help them. And we went out into the community, and we had a little assembly line, and we put these buckets together. They had to be all put together with this fancy filtration system, and then we distributed them as well as hygiene kits. And it was just great to be a part of something that was so needed and to help the WASH people. And as Lance said, something that really stood out to all of us and to anyone who is in the Philippines is their absolute resilience. I looked it up because I think we use that word a lot, and we don't really get the full essence of what it means, but it means the ability to spring back into shape, to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And they absolutely had that beyond really anything I've ever personally seen before. When we first arrived, it really looked like a ghost town. There was not a ton of people out. There wasn't really any traffic, and it just was devastating. But really, within a week, people began to start building. They used debris, whatever they could find on the side of the road, to make some sort of a makeshift shelter, and they just started making things happen, and it was so obvious. By the end of the 30 days that I was there, the market was up and running again in the downtown areas. People were smiling and working, and we had to deal with traffic, and it was great to see that transition. This is a great sign that we saw along the way. This is so perfect and totally describes their resilience. It says, ruthless, homeless, but not hopeless. And that exactly describes the spirit of the Filipinos. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. And it was such a privilege to come alongside of them and watch them rebuild their lives and to really see tangible ways that we could help them. This is some of our medical team when Franklin came to visit, and there's the field hospitals. It was an amazing day to open up the field hospital and kind of start business. Even though we had been working the week before that came, it was wonderful. It was such a blessing to the staff of the hospital to supplement and give them some room. We eventually set up a third tent, which was actually the pediatric ward, and that allowed those pediatric patients to sort of spread out and kind of be quarantined into their own little area. And my last slide before you hear from Ingrid is, to sum it up, I really experienced, you have a lot of nerves going in, feeling like, will I have the skills that are needed? And I just prayed every day, God, please equip me with what I will see today. Help me to be a blessing to my patients, to the hospital staff, who I'd really grown to love, and to my fellow team members, because a lot of our team, they were tired after 30 days. They were hot. Many got sick, really sick, and they just plugged along. God just equipped us with everything we needed in every given moment, and He provided the strength that we needed. Thank you so much for listening, and now it's Ingrid's turn.
Thanks, Lance, for allowing me to share some of my reflections along with some of the teachings that I've been listening to from a pastor in Seattle, Richard Dahlstrom. My talk today is not medical in nature, but are some of my recent meditations, and perhaps they align to some of your thoughts on your own particular journeys. To begin, I want you to know that I love being a doctor. I have no doubt that I was called to the profession, but I have no illusions concerning medicine. It's very clear to me that it is merely a tool in the grand scheme of things. Medicine is not an end in and of itself, but a tool to be the presence of Christ to a world that is desperately thirsty. Thirst. We all know what it means to be thirsty. Most of our deployments seem to be near the equator, and it's second nature to pack a water bottle. We cringe at dumping water prior to going through airport security, and we often overpay for bottled water. Some of us even bring fancy water filters. We come prepared because we know what it's like to be thirsty. If we are really honest with ourselves, we know that our own heart is a desert in need of daily healing and transformation. So it comes as no surprise that we know that this world is desperately thirsty. This world is one big desert in need of a cup of water. John 7:38 says, "He who believes in me, as the scriptures have said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." As one who believes, Christ followers, we are that cup of water when we become the presence of Christ in our world. Because wherever Christ is, there is good news, there is hope, and there is a glimpse of this kingdom of God here on earth. My thoughts today center on the theme of being the presence of Christ in order to be a blessing in this world. I know that each of us want to make each day count, to finish well, and to feel His glory in us as we do His will. We want to be that cup of water. Next. Okay. This picture is a picture of a truck that was parked outside the original place where we stayed. And it reminded me of a quote from the movie The Titanic, when Jack Dawson said, "I got everything I need right here with me. I got the air in my lungs, a few blank sheets of paper. I mean, I love waking up in the morning not knowing what's going to happen or who I'm going to meet, where I'm going to wind up. Just the other night I was sleeping under a bridge, and here I am on the grandest ship in the world, having champagne with you fine people. I figure life's a gift, and I don't intend on wasting it. You don't know what hand you're going to get dealt next. You learn to take life as it comes, to take each day as it counts." Well, Jack Dawson was quite the biblical scholar. He got it right when he said that life is a gift. His breath was a gift, and we don't know what the future holds. But to make each day count, it's quite profound. Jack Dawson was traveling light. Yes, traveling light, not holding on to things so tightly, allows us the opportunity to not be encumbered with things that keep us from ministry. The concept is not so much empty hands, but open hands. Oh, how I wish I would have learned this lesson earlier. Perhaps more opportunities would have been taken, more adventures experienced. We need to say yes to God. Whatever He gives us, whatever He takes from us, whatever He asks of us, to be the presence of Christ, to live in the grace of one day, to be fully present in that day, unencumbered with the things that do not matter. This pic was taken the day I arrived while driving from the airport to Tacloban. I was with Kenny and I was with Aaron, and Aaron was telling Kenny about everything that had been going on a few days prior. There's always moments that capture a disaster, and this one was it for me. Isaiah 55, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come buy and eat. Yes, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Devastation. The world is a desert, a wasteland. But look at the cross. The cross is central. The cross hanging from the rearview mirror just reminds us that the cross is good news. It's the only thing that makes sense of the suffering that we saw, that we felt, that we experienced. The cross is the redemptive story. The suffering Christ comes into our suffering world and brings himself. He comes to comfort us. We know this because Matthew 5 tells us, blessed are they that mourn, for they will be comforted. He himself comes to comfort us, and we become the presence of Christ when we comfort others with the comfort that we have been shown. Again, John 7:38 says, he who believes in me, as the scriptures have said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. We are that cup of water, as we are the presence of Christ to those who suffer. We extended Christ's love to our Filipino colleagues, our patients, and our co-workers, and it was the most beautiful thing to witness as we saw the gospel go out in word and deed. The next slide. Yes, we saw this numerous times as we came back from our mobile medical clinics. The sign caught my eye a few days earlier, and we stopped to take this picture. Basically, the message is profound. Hope wins. Wherever Jesus is, there is good news, even in the most devastating of situations. God shows up in times of great suffering. The zone of suffering becomes a crucible where we experience transformation, intimacy with God. We become better people. We become more sensitive to others who suffer. It's the place where trust and hope grows. We go deeper so that we're able to hope and offer hope, even in times of great suffering and times of his perceived absence. I shared Luke 1 in devotions one day, and it bears repeating. Hope wins because nothing is impossible without God. Romans 12, 10 through 13 says, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love and honor, giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in prayer, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, given to hospitality. Jenny was our host at our hotel. She blessed us. She made our world so much better. She looked for ways to serve us. Even coffee was available at 6 a.m. That meant something to all of us. We were able to serve better because we did not have to worry about our meals. Jenny looked for ways to make our meals special. Our rooms were cleaned daily. Jenny was the presence of Christ to us. Hospitality is not an option according to Romans 12. Thanks to Jenny, she has given us a template on how to do it right. Come on in. Well, there were others who showed us hospitality. Think about how difficult it may have been for all the staff to adjust not only to all of us, but also to the havoc that the typhoon inflicted upon them and their routines. We can learn from them. They were so pleasant, they often put us to shame. Pleasant and accommodating. Dr. Escape was a fine CEO. He let us help him. I'm sure that he felt the loss of control at times, but he intentionally stepped aside as we went to work. God orchestrated our partnership with Shisto Hospital so that we were positioned for great ministry. Dr. Escapé served us. He's an example of humility on how to set aside for the benefit of others. It is a lesson observed, the best kind, a form of hospitality. We had our own leader who taught us how to serve. Lance, you were a wonderful example, being the presence of Christ to us. You were kind to the hospital staff, to us, and you showed us how to serve in word and deed. I know that we all feel very privileged to have served alongside you. This was my first official DART. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who thinks that the DART went amazingly well, that it was amazingly well orchestrated in such a short period of time. We have our team leader to thank. Calm and steady describes Aaron. He was also a great communicator, but most importantly, he was the presence of Christ to all of us. He set the tone for all of us. It made it easy for all of us to serve. Some of us wanted our picture taken with Franklin, but Kelly and I treasured this one. The next few slides are pictures of our field hospital. Samaritan's first mission is to alleviate suffering, to be the presence of Christ in word and deed. Our new field hospital is a great tool in the overall mission of Samaritan's Purse. It certainly aids in the mission of alleviating suffering. The following slides capture the inaugural debut of our field hospital. You can click through these. Americans' finest for helping us set it up. That's the inside of one of our tents. We had to install the air conditioning unit in that one ourselves. You can see it, the roof. That took hours to put up. There's Lance putting up the flag. Some people always have to be center stage, and those are our three clowns. This is our official ceremony for our first field hospital inauguration day. This was the pediatric tent. This was the outpatient tent. As you can see, it was busy every day. We'd see 70 to 80 people in this tent daily. This is for Brittany Schmitz, because every time we went anywhere together, we'd always see a rooster. The place of deployment can change, but some things never change. There's always a rooster somewhere. In closing, we need to keep the main thing the main thing. There will always be another disaster. Kenny Isaac once said, disasters are a growth industry. And according to Scripture, we need to keep our mission the same and constant and continue to be the presence of Christ wherever we go in order to be a blessing to this world, because this world is so desperate for a cup of water that's free for the taking, given without price by the one who paid the price and who freely gave his life for all of us. Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Ingrid and Kelly. That was an awesome presentation. Despite technical challenges, it's amazing how God puts it all together, both here in this room and there in the Philippines. with that, I'd love to open up the floor for discussion or questions. If you're here, just kind of get in close to this mic. Does anybody have any comments they want to make or any questions? Please feel free. If you're out in the listening audience, if you'll see, there's like that little, you can click on that, see that little emoticon there, you just raise your hand, and I'll call on you. Do not be bashful.
Just one question.
Yes, John? Yeah, how did we get assigned to Sister Samaritan's Hospital? I mean, did we choose it, or did they give that to us, or how did that work? When I first got there, John, there was these meetings with the local Department of Health, and it really, I was amazed at how much competition there was amongst NGOs. I mean, it was really a cutthroat business, and you had to just get in there and they basically, you present, as we're learning, they now have 3 levels of field hospitals that they've organized, and there we had a level 1 hospital, and we were a good fit for this hospital, Sister Samaritan's Hospital, and so eventually that's where we were assigned. As I said, as we're developing capacity, with our deployment at the Alaska Shield at the end of March, we are going to rehearse our level 2 field hospital, which has, in essence, a surgical theater. And I would say most of the better field hospitals in deployed disaster responses are level 2 or maybe a little bit better. They call them a level 2.5. Very few are a level 3, where you have not only surgical capacity, but you have critical care capacity as well. Anybody in our listening audience? Allie, just click on your little talk button icon at the top left corner. Go ahead, Allie, and speak. Allie, you'll have to click on that talk icon at the top left corner to speak.
Try that one. Should we try this one?
That's it. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think there's the flexibility of the staff, especially on the medical team, to help out with other projects as required. Not only just within the hospital, as Kelly mentioned, doing immunizations, going out, doing that door to door, as we did in some instances, but also getting involved where necessary with procurement, with helping put hygiene kits together. It was a really important part as well of the whole DART response, having that flexibility of staff being able to go ahead and just do that.
Yeah, I think the DART training just definitely came in handy, Allie. Thank you.
Yeah, I got out there after you guys had gone through that major trauma of getting the hospital set up and saw the setup and saw, the job that you had done. But there comes a time when you transition from, from relief to recovery. And we were in the process of that while we were out there. We had the mobile teams still going out. We had the hospital still serving in an outpatient capacity. One of the tents had been transitioned over to being an isolation ward for the pediatric patients because we had begun to see both dengue and measles had raised their heads and were causing a problem. That is continuing out there today. I wanted to just speak into the fact that the Filipino people themselves are amazing people. We visited households where we knew that they had watched members of their family being carried away or never seen again after the storm, and yet these people were reporting to work every day. They were smiling, they were contributing, and Lord, giving back to both in their faith to the Lord, but also giving back to their people. And that sign that you showed repeatedly there, the word at the bottom of it, means to rise up. And the one that was underlined, rise up or to recover quickly. And that became their mantra. And it was just a pleasure to serve with them and to see what they were doing. They're an amazingly capable people, but they also greatly appreciated the help that they had been given and were continuing to be given. So, and as that hospital wound down, we were taking the tents down the last day I was there, and so it's kind of sad to disassemble what had gone up and been so hard to assemble. But then the need for the mobile teams continues and will continue, and they will continue to operate now through the end of March. So, there's just a number of lessons that we can learn from this. It's going to be great to sit down and put together, a lot of the lessons learned, and then to flesh those out into protocols that will drive the future of this medical outreach. So just thank you for what you did. Those of you that were first in, circumstance drives you more than anything else. Thank you for speaking into the faith in your faith and how sometimes it's the waterfall of grace that we stand under when we're operating under the power of the Holy Spirit that keeps us going. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
Tom, did you have a comment? Tom, just click on that talk icon at the top left.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me through the speaker?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I work down in the Dulag area, and some of the lessons I guess we learned from that response was some of the locals were very upset about where some of the NGOs placed their signage. They were very upset whenever any NGOs placed it over the hospital's name that they were there. And I would be very cautious about that as we place signage around. One of the other areas we did not, like you said, we did not have enough of the chronic illness medications for especially hypertension, diabetes, and especially we were very short on the phenobarbital dilantin for kids because they had wiped out their transportation, their pharmacies, and their resources, so we were very short on those medications. We did find a book later on, like you said, that had actually all the generic names of the medications. I didn't know if you all had one of those also. It was very good to have. It had all the generic and brand names that you couldn't find anywhere else, even on the internet quite often. I was really inspired by one of the t-shirts I saw down in Dulag with the Filipino people that said, "We refuse to be victims, we choose to be resources." And I thought that was the whole mantra of that whole group of people there, that they were very loving, very easy to work with, and very, like you said, resilient. And they're able to bounce back and really work together and even do menial tasks to rebuild their whole community.
Tom, I totally agree with you on all your comments. And with regard to the last one, absolutely. I've been in disasters where And I don't fault the beneficiaries, but I think maybe they were just so overwhelmed that they sat on the sidelines. But that just did not apply to the Filipinos. They just jumped right in, and so they are indeed resilient. Anything else before we close? I really want to thank all you all for joining us today. I think there's, as Tom said, there's a lot of take-home messages and a lot of learning points and principles that we will apply going forward as we continue to grow and again, improve our capacity with disaster response.